Last on Everdark, we got to experience Julian and Daemon having quite a good time feeding and being fed. Now we return to one of our ostensible foes, vampire confessor Fiona Darksilver. Everdark, Episode 22, Faith. Earlier, vampire confessor Fiona Darksilver stood in the center of the Siren Blood Den. Her silver eyes scanned the vampires who darted curious and some angry glances at her. It was never good when a confessor of her level came into a blood den. They all knew that. Vampire confessors Donato and Sloane had been called to this address because Julian Harrow had been spotted here. Yet now, everyone claimed it had been a false alarm. Even her fellow confessors were saying so. But there was a vagueness in their recollections of the evening, and the recording of who entered and exited had apparently become corrupted rather conveniently.
I smell Iros indifference,
she thought, and narrowed her eyes as she scanned those all present again. None met her gaze this time. They all sensed her anger and didn't want her to take it out on them. A confessor could sanction any vampire, which could mean imprisonment or worse. In this case, it would be the or worse. Daemon had made it quite clear that anyone who stood against them was to be eliminated, even though these vampires appeared to truly know nothing, at least not anymore, might not matter to him. If she reported what happened here, he would require them to be executed. She didn't want that. But she had to somehow salvage the evening or Daemon would focus on the failures here. She snapped her fingers at Donato and Sloane, indicating that they should follow her into one of the private rooms. She chose the first one on her right. When she stepped inside, there was a particular perfume she recognized.
Sophia Strange,
she said out loud, and her stomach fell. A seer was involved in this, a very powerful seer. Sophia had long been suspected of treachery, but there had never been any proof of it. She always danced out of the Order's grasp. Daemon, though, would see her presence here as proof of guilt. But Sophia was a beloved seer and had many allies. Harming her would harm the Order, but Daemon wouldn't see it that way. He would only see betrayal. Donato blinked almost sleepily at her, more proof of mind control and brainwashing, and said, "What, my lady?" She turned around to face him, her cloak snapping behind her like a living thing. The beads in her hair clicked.
Sophia Strange was here. She was in this room.
Sloane frowned, her forehead puckered.
You don't remember? Is that what you were going to say? Because you don't remember Julian Harrow being here, but I am certain he was.
Fiona couldn't help the sharpness in her tone. It had Sloane flinching as if she had been struck.
I'm trying my best, my lady, to give you the information you want, but I cannot lie to you and tell you what I did not experience.
She whined.
I simply do not recall her being in the blood den. We allowed no one to leave after getting the message about the Harrow boy.
And yet she was here, and not all that long ago. This evening, definitely. Yet somehow she is gone, and somehow no one remembers her.
Fiona took in a second deep breath of the air. There was another scent. Something not familiar, and yet it tantalized her nostrils. She felt she should know it. It smelled primal to her somehow. Was it the Harrow boy?
And someone was with her. But I'm betting you don't remember them either. Don't answer that, I already know what you will say.
The other confessors said nothing, but they did glance at one another. What was there to say? She was claiming they were either incompetent or brainwashed. Either was unacceptable for a confessor. Confessors were to be strong enough of mind to resist an Iros attack, but they had not.
The whole blood den is brainwashed, though,
she thought with a touch of alarm.
It would take dozens of Iros days to accomplish this, but it has been done in less than one night. And somehow I do not think a troop of Iros came in here.
That left two possibilities. The first was that the Vampire King himself had come to spirit away Sophia Strange and Julian Harrow. But even if such a being truly did exist, why would he come to get those two? And the message that had been received by the Order was that Julian had come in alone. She supposed if the Vampire King did exist, then he could make himself invisible. But why would he? And why would he bring Julian to a siren blood den, then erase everyone's memories of them being there? That simply made no sense. The other possibility was more likely, and in a way, far more worrisome.
Balthazar Ravenscroft.
She named that second possibility in her head. Even though Balthazar was young, he had managed to overthrow and kill Roan Tithe, his own master. Roan had been brilliant at mind control, especially over his fledglings, but Balthazar had ended him with extreme prejudice.
And Arceus came to his side, convinced the council to simply exile instead of execute him as the law requires.
She thought with some bitterness. It wasn't that she believed that what Roan had been doing was right. No, absolutely not. It should have been dealt with by the council or the Order long before Balthazar killed him. But Roan was a veteran of the War of the Immortals. Excuses were made for him. Lenience was offered. He had sacrificed part of his soul and mind for all of them. This had granted him centuries to abuse his fledglings while everyone turned a blind eye. She wasn't even angry that Arceus had argued vociferously on Balthazar's behalf. He'd made the point that if they had intervened when they should have, the murder would never have happened. But few wanted to take on the responsibility of failing a whole house. Interfering in a house was something that was simply never to be done if one could help it. Also, people knew that Balthazar was one of Arceus's projects, after all. One of those broken, brilliant, and beautiful young men that attracted the vampire confessor's love, devotion, and desire to bring back into the fold. So they had dismissed many of his arguments. All of Arceus's points she had understood. It was the fact that Arceus had abandoned her for Balthazar that still smarted. She had been his apprentice for well over 200 years, but he had thrown her over for a vampire he'd known only half a century, a vampire that had killed his master, a vampire that did not even believe. Yet Arceus hadn't even hesitated when the council had told him that the only way they would consider not executing Balthazar for the unforgivable sin of killing his master, even if it was to save himself and the other members of House Tithe, was if Arceus went into exile himself.
I accept. I will go into exile,
Arceus had said without a moment's thought to the council that had loomed above him on the half-moon dais. Fiona had been standing beside him, and she couldn't help her gasp. She'd turned to him, her hands clenched before her chest, and said,
But you can't. You can't leave.
He'd touched her hands gently with one of his large bear-like paws and smiled down at her beatifically.
But I must. We failed to protect them. We did not rein in the Roan when we had the chance, and now look what has happened.
But it doesn't have to be you who goes. It's not your fault. You wanted to do something, but others wouldn't.
He pressed 2 fingers to her lips to stop her from mentioning Caemorn's name, and bringing upon herself censure at best, and exile at worst. Caemorn had been the one to nix most of Arceus's arguments. He had taken pleasure in doing it too.
I am a member of the Order. I am as responsible as much as any other,
he told her. You are a member of the Order no longer, Arceus Cain. You are hereby exiled with the rest of House Tithe, Councillor Thalen said, and rapped his gavel on the wooden table.
No, that's impossible!
Fiona.
Arceus gently held her. He was still smiling. His eyes were filled with tears, but not at leaving Everdark or losing his position or anything like that. He felt her pain, but he was still going to leave her despite the fact that she was in agony because of it. She'd known even then, beyond her own pain, that the loss of Arceus was more than unjust. It would be a detriment to the Order. He was not simply a senior confessor with a brilliant heart and brilliant mind, but also a balance to those in the Order, like Caemorn, who put politics first instead of faith. Arceus was a figure whom other confessors rallied around. He was someone who could have blunted Caemorn's more authoritarian and detrimental policies over the years. For if Arceus opposed something, there would at least be a debate. He had been an incredibly powerful figure, though he himself had never seemed to grasp that. There were rumors that the Order had been considering replacing Caemorn with Arceus at some point. That was, until he was exiled. "My lady," Donato said hesitantly, noticing her lack of focus. She snapped back to the present and zeroed in on him.
What?
"What would you have us do?" he asked.
Balthazar Ravenscroft.
She said the name of the man who had stolen Arceus, not only from her, but from the Order itself, and allowed Caemorn to run wild.
I believe he is behind this. He and his house.
Sloane was frowning again. Fiona was really starting to hate that frown.
But, if I recall rightly, Balthazar has no love for the Immortals or the Order. He does not believe in anything. So why would he help the Harrow Boy or this potential rogue immortal?
Fiona repressed a sigh. Sloane did not understand Balthazar's psychology. He'd been damaged by people in authority, so he pushed back and even denied their existence. He would be one to help Daemon, not to help the Vampire King, but to simply thumb his nose at the Order and the council that had thrust him out.
But Arceus would believe. He has always believed that Daemon was out there, sleeping and waiting to return. He would urge Balthazar to take his side as well.
Her heart clenched at the thought of Arceus being on the opposite side of the Order, the opposite side of her. Even if Daemon was real, and the first among equals, the vampires would never allow him to rule them. The Immortals were rather like the Greek and Roman gods, in her opinion. Powerful, but full of vices, and not fit to rule justly or wisely. The way things were now was better, but a small voice in her head whispered, "And what of Caemorn? Do you think he is just and wise? Do you think he is worthy of leadership? No, you do not. Arceus should be preceptor, but instead he was sent away, and now he might be on the opposite side of you in this battle."
We are going to watch House Ravenscroft.
She finally informed the two other confessors.
And once we have the proof we need, we will go in.
Not only are the Everdark actors incredibly talented at what they do, they're also fascinating people. I hope you're getting to know them as well as me in our mini Q&As every week. If you tend to skip those, go back and take a listen. Sometimes we talk about the episode you've just heard and get a little more into lore or characters. Other times it's about the craft of voice acting, vampires in general, fantasy and games, or just life. These interludes are only about 5 to 8 minutes long, and if you have thoughts of your own about what we're talking about, we want to hear them. Come to the YouTube version of the episode and leave a comment. The voice actors are also keen to know your thoughts and are watching the comments as well.
She desperately wanted to speak to Arceus first, but the moment he saw her, House Ravenscroft would hide whatever it was doing. If the house was giving King Daemon sanctuary, she would lose whatever chance she had of stopping his return. He would be weak now, just having awakened. Later, it might be too late if even a tenth of the stories about his powers were true.
Tell no one of what we are doing. The two of you are to go dark.
She informed them.
What we do now is crucial to the very heart of the vampire world.
Both bowed low.
Is the yelling over?
Sophia Strange asked as she peeked into the room. She had changed into a yellow baby doll dress with strappy sandals that somehow made her look younger to Balthazar than before. She caught sight of William and came over.
Oh, William, don't cry.
She crouched down by him and patted his back.
It's over now. Balthazar won't be angry with you forever.
You see that in the future, do you? Balthazar asked archly. She smiled up at him.
You're even feeling bad about it now, though you shouldn't.
She went back to addressing William, who looked at her with a tear-streaked face.
You were very wrong, William, to be so disrespectful to our king and his fledgling. I know you won't do it again, and will be a loyal subject, but you must understand how very wrong you were.
I won't ever do it again.
William sobbed. Balthazar did feel badly, even though William and the others had earned his shouting and, if he were a different sort of master, he would have done far more than that. But still, he hated to see his people upset. He knew he was indulgent, and that was why their seeming betrayal had hurt so much more. Even now, they all clustered around the edges of the room like shamed children. He pinched the top of his nose. He felt a hand on his back. He opened his eyes, but he already knew it was Christian touching him, comforting me. He looked into his fledgling's beautiful face. He found himself focusing on those lips especially. Christian had kissed him. He was pretty sure that it was because the young man had lost himself in the joy of feeding and wasn't truly personal. But still, it was a start, and now Christian was touching him to comfort him. That hand immediately left his back as if Christian sensed what he was thinking.
Thank you for keeping your temper,
Christian said quietly.
It would be a terrible tragedy to make Julian and my introduction to your house accompanied by another death.
You are too kind, Christian. Considering William there, though he looks like a choir boy, is old enough to be your grandfather and is not at all sweet. Would have ripped your best friend's heart out if he could, Balthazar remarked dryly. Christian's head tipped up.
There was no chance of that happening.
We don't know that, Balthazar protested.
On the contrary, Daemon entered your room as a pack of wolves.
Christian replied.
I'm pretty sure he could take on one vampire all by himself. I'm pretty sure he can take on all of us at the same time.
He appeared in your quarters as a pack of wolves, my lord?
Isabel asked, her right hand fluttering by her string of pearls.
He did,
Christian assured her. Oh, yes, it was quite dramatic. He likes to be dramatic. I mean, he levitated William. Balthazar bit down on the laugh he wanted to let out. That was impressive and funny at the same time, or would have been if it had not been caused by William's absolute foolishness. I should have called a house meeting. I should have explained everything, but I didn't. I let rumors swirl and didn't let them voice their fears. This is somewhat my fault, he realized. I was the foolish one, but I was so put off my game by having Christian and Julian finally here that I didn't think.
Bloodline wherein?
Isabel whispered, and she twisted her strand of beads so hard that it snapped, and the pearls scattered everywhere. Oh, damn, Balthazar muttered, and went to lean down to collect some of them. But Isabel grasped the front of his shirt, and her eyes were frantic.
He really is our king, isn't he? The first among equals, and we attacked him.
Balthazar wanted to say that if she wanted someone to confirm that Daemon was the vampire king, she should seek out Arceus. He didn't believe it, except that wasn't quite true any longer. He'd seen some of what Daemon could do, and though the man was really weak right now, his powers were incredible. Further, he had all the powers that the vampire king was supposed to have. They hadn't seen Armageddon yet, but no vampire he knew could perform 2 of the Bloodline's powers, let alone the half-dozen he'd already displayed. Further, he came from Nightvallen. Also, Julian bore his mark, and perhaps more importantly, the Order was trying to hush it all up. His eyes met Christian's. He knew that this very scientifically minded fledgling of his had already accepted that Daemon was king based upon facts. So why was he so resistant to it? He found himself saying, yes, he is. But he didn't seem to mind that our people attacked him. He actually praised me, and all of you. Didn't you notice? She blinked at him. He frowned. He sounded like a little boy who'd been given a pat on the head. He didn't need anyone's approval, let alone this supposed king. He would only call a person king, or majesty, or master, if they had earned his respect. Daemon had yet to do that. He'd acted magnanimously with William, to be sure, but that was hardly enough to win over Balthazar. Just because he might be the Daemon of legend doesn't really mean anything, Isabel. We threw off the yoke of the other immortals when they used us as cannon fodder. If he thinks he can just come in and rule us all, he's got another thing coming, he told her. Isabel, though, was looking off into the distance, eyes filled with a mixture of shock and awe. Her hands loosed on his shirt front, and she drifted over to William's side. Sophia was still trying to coax him up, but William wanted to remain kneeling until Balthazar allowed him to rise. Another stab of guilt went through Balthazar. He glanced over at Christian. His fledgling was regarding William out of sympathetic eyes. That was enough to move him. Enough of this, Balthazar muttered. He leaned down and picked up William into his arms. The vampire weighed practically nothing and looked up at him out of huge eyes in a tear-stained face. You really are adorable. Dangerously so, William. I am still very angry with you. You know that, don't you?
Yes, my lord.
He sniffled and lowered his head. Fat tears slid down his face and landed on Balthazar's shirt.
Oh, no.
He tried desperately to blot them, knowing how particular Balthazar was about his clothing.
I am so sorry.
Enough with the apologies. I know you are, Balthazar said. Christian, we are going to take William to his room. Then we are going to finish what we started in the coach house. Christian nodded. He then addressed the room. The rest of you, go back to your evening. I'm sure there will be a lot of gossiping, but save your questions until tomorrow. We will be having a house meeting where I will try to answer them all. But know this. His voice grew very stern. Daemon and Julian are our guests. I want there to be no misunderstandings about that. I do not care what other feelings you might have about them. They are to be treated with respect. There were nods all around, and the vampires drifted away in groups. They were already chattering softly amongst themselves. He was sure that the house hadn't had this kind of excitement in years. Before Isabel left, she looked back at him, and he couldn't completely read her expression at first. She had been very devout back when Roan had ruled their house. Her faith had waned after they had been exiled, though she still prayed with Arceus weekly. He'd assumed her faith to be something to hang on to when Roan was vile. Now he saw a fervorous light in her eyes again. He wondered what those that did believe in the old tales about Daemon being their savior would think about the fact that he was their guest. The exiled house hosted the vampire king. Maybe Arceus was right, that this truly could be their ticket back into the vampire world. Sophia spoke up.
Before you go, there's something you need to know, Balthazar.
What is it? Do you need another piece of furniture? I don't mind the COD thing. Quite convenient, really. He teased her. As he said this, William rested his head tentatively on Balthazar's shoulder. William always loved to be cuddled. It was something that Roan had enjoyed withholding from him. He let William snuggle down. He worried for a moment that Christian might be jealous, but one glance at his Spock-like fledgling and the thought fled. Christian was not worried about his place with him. Balthazar nearly shone with joy at that.
Oh, good. But no more things are arriving tonight. At the end of the week, though, I am expecting some exquisite linen.
She informed him, practically swooning at the thought of sheets.
You're so generous with me, Lord Balthazar.
He grunted. Of course. I'm expecting to hear about that greatness you promised me in return at some point. She giggled.
You're so funny. But really, one of my predictions has already come through, so you mustn't be greedy.
What prediction?
Christian asked. Balthazar winced. He knew which one it was. She had said that Daemon was going to be the exact person he was looking for, and in that one instant when Daemon had praised him, he had felt something. And Daemon sparing William after dealing with the mutiny so well had also been rather a relief. It was as if he had someone he could turn to, even steadier than Arceus. Daemon had that quality of command, but he shook himself. He was reading too much into this. That needy part inside of him that still wanted a master on some level, since Roan had been such a monster and not up to the task, had latched onto a commanding voice and demeanor. That was all. It didn't mean anything about whether Daemon was worthy or that he needed him. Sophia just smiled enigmatically, not answering Christian before saying,
And one other thing.
What? he asked with a sense of dread. She'd already told him about the linen. He supposed dresses or something were next. But that wasn't what she had to tell him.
I'm afraid you'll have to go out to eat this evening. Daemon will have drained all the acolytes.
All of them, he asked faintly.
Well over a dozen.
She qualified.
So, you see, there simply won't be enough to go around. And since you're the type of vampire lord that feeds himself last...
He groaned and tipped his head back.
I won't feed, my lord.
William offered.
I know you have to feed for two.
William, you look like you need to recover at home. And besides, going out would be good.
Christian put in.
Balthazar, you can show me how to hunt and use mind control. I wish to start my education as soon as possible.
But, Balthazar pathetically bleated. We need to be alone and...
We will be alone. Well, us and a city full of people.
Christian said with a shrug.
Besides, there's nothing that really interests me in the coach house.
Other than the kissing and touching and beds. Nothing there of interest at all. But he already knew that Christian wasn't going to sleep with him that night. He was also pretty sure there would be no repeat of the kissing or touching, so maybe it was best if they were out and about. Christian loved to learn. He loved to teach. That could be the start of a relationship between them. Balthazar grinned. All right, I will take you out hunting then. Join us next time for episode 23, Kinds.
Many people have asked us if there are ebooks of the Everdark series. Yes, now there are ebooks, as well as Everdark merch. The ebooks are available in PDF, ePub, and Mobi from our own merch shop. Just follow the link in the notes to the Everdark series to read on your phone or any device. And check out the t-shirts, mugs, art prints, and pop sockets while you're at it. Your support really matters to us as small creators, and any purchases go directly to supporting the creation of more stories, just like Everdark and Dragon's Reign. Thanks, you guys.
The Everdark podcast by Ex Aratare is performed by Edward Fox, Adam Riley, Jay Thillis, Bruno Devant, Kelly Michaels, and Hannah Hart, with Liz Gentle as Seer. Edited by Matthew Prince, continuity by Adrielle Wiggins. Everdark is produced by Wraith Rain Publishing in association with Her Grace Reed Studios. Copyright 2022 by Wraith Rain Publishing.